I spent 10 long years giving up absolutely everything just to finally own the dream house I imagined since childhood. My father's unexpected decision changed everything forever. When I was 10 years old, my dad drove me through a neighborhood far outside our town, quiet streets, huge oaks arching over the road, houses with wraparound porches and warm lights glowing through big windows. I pressed my face against the window and whispered, "One day, I'm gonna live in a house like that." My dad laughed softly, ruffled my hair, and told me, "Dream big, kid. Just don't let your dreams swallow your whole life." Back then, I didn't understand what he meant. But I remembered those words. More importantly, I remembered that neighborhood. That feeling of belonging. That sense of home. And at just 22 years old, when most of my friends were planning trips or starting families, I made a vow that nothing, absolutely nothing, would stop me from buying a house like that. 10 years. 10 years of saying no to everything that made life fun. No new clothes. No vacations. No restaurants. No spontaneous road trips. No nights out. No hobbies that weren't cheap. No time. Barely any sleep. I took every overtime shift I could. I worked weekends. I worked holidays. I even worked sick, more than once. My life shrank to two things: work and saving. My friends joked that I was the monk with a mortgage goal. Some stopped inviting me places altogether. Others drifted away naturally. I won't lie, it hurt. But I kept reminding myself, this is the price. This is the dream. Don't stop now. The only person who constantly pushed back was my father. My dad was a simple man, quiet, patient, slow to anger but fast to understand. Every Sunday, no matter how busy I was, I'd visit him for coffee. And every Sunday, he'd say the same thing. "Son, you can build a house out of money, but a home needs something deeper." I thought he was being dramatic. I'd roll my eyes, tell him I knew what I was doing, and hurry off to get back to work. He'd smile sadly, like he knew something I didn't. Now I understand that smile. Back then I didn't. After almost a decade of grinding, it finally happened. I found it. The house from my childhood memories. Almost exactly the same. White porch. Tall trees. Warm glowing windows. 5 bedrooms. Huge kitchen. 3 acres of land. A study with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. A view of the sunrise that hit the backyard like a scene from a movie. It was everything I had ever dreamed of. Everything I had sacrificed for. Everything I had built my life around. But there was a problem. The price. It was just barely, out of reach. Even after 10 years, even after all the sacrifices, I was short. Not by a lot, but by enough to crush me. I tried every bank, every loan officer, every possible angle. But without help, I wasn't going to get the house. And the only person who could help me was the one person I was almost too proud to ask. My dad. I didn't want to do it. Asking for help felt like undoing 10 years of suffering. Like admitting I hadn't been strong enough. But the house listing was moving fast. People were lining up to see it. So I swallowed my pride and went to see him. When I told him everything, he didn't react the way I expected. No lecture. No. I told you so. He just looked at me with those calm eyes and said, "If this is the dream you want more than anything, I'll help you." I almost cried right there. He loaned me the amount I needed, interest-free, and told me not to rush paying it back. It felt like the greatest victory of my entire life. I signed the contract. I got the keys. I walked inside that house and felt 10 years of exhaustion melt into pure joy. But that joy didn't last. Because 2 weeks later, everything fell apart. My dad called me one evening and asked if I could stop by. His voice sounded off. Thin. Weak. When I got to his house, he was sitting on the couch, pale and shaky. That's when he told me. He was sick. Really sick. and he had known for months. He hadn't wanted to tell me because he knew how hard I was fighting for my dream. The money he gave me? Money he should have saved for treatment. Money he should have used for himself. I felt my chest cave in. Dad, why would you do that? He smiled the same sad smile he'd been giving me for years. Because you spent your whole life chasing a home, and I wanted to give you the chance to finally live in one. Guilt hit me harder than anything I'd ever felt. For 10 years I had been so focused on building a dream house that I didn't notice my father, my only real family, was slipping away. All those Sundays where he hinted that life was more than work. He wasn't criticizing me. He was warning me. Because he knew something I didn't. Time runs out. A house can wait. People can't. I offered to sell the house. Use the money for his treatments. But he refused, firmly. He said, "Don't undo your dream because of me. I want you to live in it. I want you to start having a life, not just chasing one." My dad didn't make it to see the house fully furnished. He didn't get to sit on the porch with me. He didn't get to see the life he helped me build. But before he passed, he left me a letter. One I didn't open until after the funeral. Inside, he wrote, "A house is wood and stone. A home is made of moments. Don't spend your whole life chasing walls. Fill them with something worth remembering." I read that letter 100 times. Each time it hurt more. And each time it healed me a little too. I still live in that house. But it's not a trophy anymore. Not a monument to sacrifice. Not proof that I made it. It's a reminder. Of my dad. Of time. Of balance. Of the truth that dreams mean nothing if you lose the people who helped you reach them. Every morning, when the sun rises over the backyard, I sit on the porch with a cup of coffee, just like he used to. And I whisper a small thank you. Not for the house. But for the lesson that saved my life. I still live in that house, but the way I see it has changed completely. In the beginning, every wall felt heavy, as if the place was built not from wood and stone, but from all the moments I missed while chasing it. For months, I walked through the rooms in silence, sometimes feeling proud, sometimes ashamed, and sometimes completely lost. I'd sit on the porch in the early morning with coffee in my hands, watching the sunlight stretch across the yard, and I would imagine my dad sitting beside me, quiet, patient, calm. I wondered what he would say if he could see me now. Probably something simple. Something true. Something that would hit harder than any long speech. For a long time, I thought the house was the end of my story. The final chapter. The finishing line I had been crawling toward for 10 years. But life, in its strange and unpredictable way, doesn't stop just because you reach a milestone. In fact, sometimes the moment you think you've arrived is the moment when everything truly begins. About 6 months after my dad passed, I started noticing things around the house. Not anything supernatural or dramatic, just small, quiet details I had been too exhausted or too emotional to see before. The oak tree in the yard bloomed earlier than the others on the street. The floorboards in the hallway creaked in the exact same rhythm as the ones in the house where I grew up. The kitchen window caught the evening light in a way that made the whole room glow warm gold. It was as if the house was trying to speak to me, telling me something I had ignored for most of my life. Slow down, pay attention, be here now. One evening, I found an old wooden box my father had slipped into one of my moving boxes without telling me. Inside were photos, some of him, some of me, some of us together. There were letters I had written him as a kid, drawings, school report cards he had saved even though they were awful. And at the bottom of the box, wrapped in a folded piece of cloth, was a small brass key. I didn't recognize it, but I felt something inside me shift when I held it. My dad wasn't a man who kept random objects. If he saved a key, it meant something. The next days I searched the house for anything the key might open, but nothing fit. It wasn't for the doors, not for the shed, not for old cabinets, not for the attic. But the more I searched, the more I realized that maybe the key wasn't for something physical. Maybe it was symbolic. A message from him, like the letter he left me. A reminder that not everything in life needs to be unlocked with force and effort. Some things reveal themselves only when you stop trying so hard. Still, I kept the key in my pocket, and for some reason, carrying it felt like carrying a piece of my father with me. And as strange as it sounds, that little piece of brass became the start of something unexpected. A few weeks later, a woman moved into the house across the street. She was around my age, maybe a little younger, and she had the kind of laugh that made others want to join in. One morning I was on my porch, drinking coffee, when she waved at me from across the road. I waved back, self-conscious, unsure how to talk to people after so many years spent working instead of living. But she walked over and introduced herself. Her name was Emily. She said she had seen me sitting outside every morning and wondered if I ever talked to actual human beings or if I was just part of the porch. I laughed harder than I had in years. We talked for hours. Something about her made time feel different, lighter, slower, kinder. She wasn't impressed with the house, or with the years I spent chasing it, or with the sacrifices I had made. What interested her was the person behind all that. The one I barely remembered myself. She asked me what I wanted now that my dream was real. And when I opened my mouth to answer, nothing came out. For the first time, I realized I had no idea. My entire identity had been built on the climb, not the destination. Over the weeks, Emily and I became close, first as neighbors, then as friends, then as something deeper. She brought new life into the house. She convinced me to plant flowers in the yard, even though I insisted they'd die immediately. She hung wind chimes on the porch that made soft music at dusk. She cooked in the kitchen with the windows open, letting the scent drift into every hallway. For the first time since buying the place, the house didn't feel like a monument to my sacrifices. It felt like a living, breathing home. One evening, as we were sitting under the oak tree watching the fireflies flicker across the lawn, she asked about the brass key I always carried. I told her the truth. I didn't know what it opened. She took it, turned it between her fingers, and smiled. "Maybe it doesn't open anything," she said. "Maybe it's just a reminder that not everything in life needs unlocking. Some things just need understanding." Her words echoed the ones my dad had spoken over and over throughout my life. And in that moment, it felt as if the two of them, my father from the past and Emily in the present, were guiding me toward the same truth. Life isn't meant to be lived in pursuit mode forever. It's meant to be lived in the moments between. That night I walked through the house again, but this time it felt different. Not heavy, not empty, not silent. It felt warm. It felt full. It felt like something my father would be proud of, not because I owned it, but because I finally learned how to live inside it. And even now, every morning when I sit on the porch with my coffee, I feel the sunrise touching the house like a blessing. I hear the wind chimes ringing softly. I see the flowers growing despite my doubts. And I hold the brass key in my hand, knowing it doesn't need a lock to matter. It's a reminder of everything I lost, everything I gained, and everything I finally understand. Dreams are worth chasing, but life is worth living. And sometimes, the real home you're building isn't made of wood and stone at all. It's made of the people who stay, the lessons that shape you, and the moments you finally allow yourself to feel. Emily became part of my life so naturally that I sometimes forgot there was a time before she existed in my days. She had this way of grounding me without ever trying to. When I got lost in thoughts about my father, or the sacrifices I'd made, or the guilt that still sat like a stone inside my chest, she didn't try to fix it. She just listened. And somehow, that was enough. But despite all the good she brought, something in the air of the house began to shift. Not in a frightening way, more like a quiet whisper of something waiting to be discovered. The kind of feeling you get when you walk into a room and sense you've forgotten something important. It started with the attic. I never spent much time up there. The place was dusty and filled with boxes from previous owners. One rainy afternoon, while Emily was reading on the porch swing, I went up to look for an old toolkit. As I was moving things around, I noticed a small wooden door built into the far wall. It was barely visible behind a stack of chairs, and I had never seen it before. The handle was old, tarnished, and slightly crooked. I tried opening it, but it wouldn't budge. It wasn't locked, it was simply stuck, as if it hadn't been opened in decades. Almost without thinking, I reached into my pocket. The brass key. I stared at it, my pulse unexpectedly skipping. I told myself it was just a coincidence, that the door was probably jammed with paint or warped by humidity, and yet, something inside me stirred. A strange mix of fear, excitement, and an emotion I couldn't name. But when I pressed the key into the lock, it didn't fit. Not even close. I felt embarrassed, though no one was there to see it. Part of me wanted the key to matter, to open something, to reveal something, to be more than a symbolic weight in my pocket. For a moment, I let the disappointment wash over me, then I climbed back down the attic stairs. When I told Emily about the little door later that evening, she tilted her head thoughtfully. "Maybe that door doesn't need the key either," she said, smiling gently. "Maybe it's waiting for the right moment." Her calmness frustrated me and comforted me at the same time. I wanted answers, not patience. But patience was something my father always tried to teach me, and something I was only now beginning to understand. Days went by, and the house settled into a peaceful rhythm. I fixed up the garden, installed shelves in the study, and spent more time talking to my neighbors. Emily and I began cooking dinners together, laughing at recipes gone wrong and celebrating the ones that somehow turned out right. But the attic door stayed with me, like a thought I couldn't shake off. One night, around midnight, I woke up suddenly. No noise, no nightmare, just a strong feeling pulling me upward. The house was quiet, the type of quiet that feels thick, like the air is holding its breath. Emily was asleep beside me, curled in a peaceful shape. I slipped out of bed, climbed the stairs, and opened the attic door. The small wooden door in the wall seemed almost to be waiting for me. I knelt down, tugged on the handle, and to my shock, it opened effortlessly. The wood made no sound, no groan, no creak. As if it had never been stuck at all. Inside was a small, narrow storage space. Dust floated through the beam of my flashlight. There was nothing inside except a flat wooden box, no bigger than a book. Old, hand-carved, with tiny patterns etched into the top. I lifted it carefully, as if it might crumble in my hands. And then, for the first time since I'd stepped into the house, I felt it again, that quiet presence, the one I used to feel around my father. Not a sound, not a vision, just a sense of warmth, of familiarity, of calm. I carried the box downstairs and sat at the dining table, the brass key still in my pocket. Emily woke a few minutes later and found me staring at it, heart pounding. "What is it?" she asked softly. "I don't know," I whispered. "But I think this might be what the key is for." She sat beside me, and together we opened the lid. Inside, wrapped in a folded cloth that smelled faintly of cedar, was another key. Not brass. Not shiny. Not new. This one was old iron, dark with age, heavier, colder. But the strangest part wasn't the way it looked, it was the way it felt. Like something my father had touched once. Something that had waited for me. Emily reached for it, but I put my hand over hers. "Wait," I whispered. "Just give me a second." My heartbeat echoed in my ears. Outside, the wind moved softly through the trees, making the porch chimes ring with a faint, haunting melody. The house felt alive. Not in a scary way. In a purposeful one. As if it had been holding on to secrets until I was ready, not as the person who bought it, but as the person who finally learned how to live in it. Emily looked at me with quiet understanding. "So," she said, "what do you think that key opens?" I looked down at the heavy iron key in my hand. "I don't know," I whispered. "But I think we're about to find out." For a long moment, neither of us moved. The iron key lay in my hand like a small piece of frozen night, cold, heavy, too meaningful for something so simple. I kept staring at it, waiting for some sudden realization or memory to surface, but there was nothing. Just the uneasy certainty that this key had been waiting for me long before I even stepped into this house. Maybe even before my father passed it down. Emily leaned in closer, her shoulder lightly touching mine. "We don't have to figure it out tonight," she whispered, but her voice held the same curiosity burning in my chest. "But whatever it opens, I think it's part of your story. Part of my story. Part of his story. Part of the house's story." That thought sat inside me like a spark. I didn't sleep that night. Emily eventually drifted off beside me on the couch, but I stayed awake, holding the key, listening to the wind move through the trees outside. The house felt different now, not ominous, not threatening, but watchful. Attentive. As if aware something important had finally begun. The next morning, sunlight poured through the windows in soft, gold ribbons. Emily looked at me with sleepy eyes and a slow smile, and for a moment the mystery of the key faded behind the simple warmth of her presence. We made breakfast, sat together at the table, and talked about everything except the box and what was inside. But the silence around it felt intentional, like we were both giving ourselves a moment to breathe before diving into something deeper. Later, after Emily left for work, I walked through the house with the iron key in my pocket. The place felt familiar and strange at the same time, like a memory shifting beneath the surface. I opened drawers, cabinets, closets, not searching for a lock exactly, but letting the house lead me. Each sound, each shadow, each old floorboard felt meaningful. Eventually, I found myself standing outside the basement door. I realized then that I'd barely been down there since moving in. The space was cold and unfinished, with old stone walls and the scent of damp earth. I opened the door slowly, and cool air drifted up, brushing past me like a long exhale. My footsteps echoed as I descended the wooden stairs, the house above me growing quieter with every step. The basement was dim, lit only by the thin light from a small window near the ceiling. Dust particles floated lazily through the air. The room was mostly empty, just an old workbench, some paint cans, and a few forgotten boxes from previous owners. But in the far corner, behind a stack of wooden boards, I saw something I had never noticed before. A door. Not a full-sized one, a narrow, vertical panel built into the stone wall. Almost like a passage. Almost like it wasn't supposed to be found. My heart began to thud. The iron key grew heavier in my pocket. I walked toward the door slowly, each step measured, silent, deliberate. When I reached it, I brushed the dust away with my hand. The wood was old, older than the rest of the basement, cracked in some places, but still solid. And there, right in the center, was a small iron keyhole. My breath caught in my throat. I pulled out the key. My hands trembled. Not from fear exactly, but from something deeper, anticipation, disbelief, the overwhelming feeling that my father had somehow led me here. Not through instructions or clues, but through the house itself, through time, through memory. My fingers traced the cold metal. I hesitated, swallowing hard. "What if I'm not ready?" I said out loud, though no one could hear me. But then I remembered something Emily told me once, in her soft, quiet way. "Most people wait their whole lives to feel ready. The truth is, you don't become ready. You choose to begin." I took a breath. Steady. Slow. Certain. And then, inch by inch, I pushed the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. A pulse of warmth rushed up my arm, though I told myself it was just adrenaline. The lock resisted for a moment, old metal reluctant to move after so many silent years, and then, with a soft click, it turned. The air changed instantly. Colder. Still. Heavy with the weight of something long hidden. I pulled the door open. A faint smell drifted out, like old paper and cedar and something familiar I couldn't place. I lifted my flashlight and pointed it inside. What I saw made my breath stop. There was a room. A small, secret room carved into the foundation of the house, one I had never known existed. And inside, covering every inch of the walls, stacked on shelves, leaning against corners, stored in crates, were things that belonged to my father. Photographs. Notebooks. Tools. Old letters. A jacket I hadn't seen in years. A watch he lost when I was 13. A wooden carving he made when I was a kid. And framed on the far wall, a picture of him holding me as a baby, standing in front of this very house. My knees almost buckled. My father had been here. My father knew this place. My father was connected to this house long before I ever dreamed of buying it. And suddenly, everything, my obsession, my memories, the strange familiarity, the iron key, the attic box, clicked together into a truth so overwhelming I had to grip the wall to keep from collapsing. I wasn't the first in my family to want this house. My father had been here before. And for reasons I didn't yet understand. He never told me.